In 1982, Yamaha's engineers faced a crisis as steel frames were twisting while 500 cubic centimeter Grand Prix bikes pushed past 290 kilometers per hour. The solution was not just a new material, but a radical twin-spar aluminum chassis that would upend racing and, soon after, redefine every road bike that followed. But how did a desperate race day gamble spark an engineering revolution that altered motorcycles forever? Here is what the industry never saw coming. Grand Prix racing in the early 1980s was a contest of speed, nerve, and engineering limits. By 1982, Yamaha's 500 cubic centimeter machines were reaching nearly 290 kilometers per hour on the straights, faster than anything the old steel frames had ever been asked to handle. Riders like Kenny Roberts and Eddie Lawson wrestled with bikes that twisted beneath them at full lean, the steel backbone flexing unpredictably under the immense forces of acceleration and cornering. Every lap pushed the frame closer to its breaking point, with even minor deflections at these speeds threatening control. The OW61, Yamaha's entry for the 1982 season, faced this crucible head-on. The V4 engine's torque and the relentless escalation of horsepower exposed every weakness in the chassis. Rivals like Honda and Suzuki were also chasing new solutions, but the pressure on Yamaha's engineers was acute. Every extra kilometer per hour widened the gap between what riders demanded and what the steel frames could safely deliver. Team mechanics reported increasing difficulty keeping bikes stable through fast corners, with riders sometimes describing the sensation as riding a hinge rather than a solid platform. As the season unfolded, the urgency for a breakthrough grew impossible to ignore. The margin for error was vanishing, and the next evolution in frame design would have to arrive, not as an option, but as a necessity. The first public unveiling of Yamaha's radical new frame concept came at the 1982 Spanish Grand Prix. Mechanics wheeled out the OW61, its frame unlike anything seen in the paddock before. Gone was the familiar underloop of steel. In its place, two straight aluminum spars swept from the headstock to the swing arm pivot, forming a rigid triangle that cradled the new V4 engine. The layout was simple but daring. Every line was drawn to resist the twisting forces that had plagued riders at high speed. Early feedback from the team was immediate. The bike felt more planted in fast corners, with less of the vague flex that riders like Kenny Roberts had complained about for years. Instead of fighting a frame that wanted to twist and squirm, they found themselves able to push harder, trusting the bike to hold its line. Yamaha engineers described the new structure as offering much higher torsional stiffness compared to the old steel backbone, though no public numbers were released. The promise of this triangle frame was clear even before the checkered flag fell. It wasn't just a new way to hold an engine, it was a new answer to the problem of control at the edge of possibility. With the debut of the OW61, the search for the perfect balance between rigidity and feel had found its next frontier. Aluminum spars run in parallel, starting at the steering head and stretching straight back to the swing arm pivot. Each spar forms the side of a triangle, creating a direct path for forces to travel from the front wheel, through the frame, and out to the rear axle. This design routes the highest loads outside the engine, letting the engine act as a stressed member without relying on it to carry the full twist and flex of racing. By shaping the frame this way, Yamaha's engineers created a rigid box that resists torsion far better than the old steel backbone. When a rider leans into a corner, the frame's geometry channels the stress along these straight, robust beams, minimizing unwanted flex. The result is a chassis that holds its line at full lean, even when the tires are loaded to the edge of their grip. The twin spar layout also serves another purpose. It pulls the bike's mass closer to the center, lowering the moment of inertia and making direction changes faster and more predictable. Unlike the distributed weight of a cradle or backbone frame, this arrangement keeps the bulk of the bike tight and low, directly beneath the rider. In practical terms, this means sharper steering and more confidence at high speed. The triangle formed by the spars and the swing arm pivot creates a stable base, anchoring the suspension and allowing it to work more independently from the flex of the frame. This separation is crucial for both precision and ride comfort. setting the stage for the next evolution in suspension design. A change in frame design alone does not guarantee a better ride. The way the suspension links to the chassis and how that setup manages forces from the road shapes everything a rider feels through the bars and seat. On the OW61, Yamaha's engineers experimented with a lateral crab claw linkage, tucking the rear shock alongside the frame to make room for the compact V4 engine. It was a clever solution for packaging, but it introduced its own set of challenges. The sideways shock layout added complexity and left the system more vulnerable to flex when the bike was pushed hard through fast corners. Riders reported a sense of disconnection at the rear wheel, especially when the suspension was loaded mid-corner. Takaaki Suzuki, a privateer mechanic who worked with both steel and early aluminum-framed Yamahas, described the difference as night and day. Suzuki said that with the vertical shock, you get a more direct feel. The wheel tells you what it is doing. The lateral setup was always a bit numb, especially when the track got rough. Suzuki's hands-on experience echoed what factory testers said in Yamaha's own reports, where vertical shock mounting used in later evolutions let the suspension react more cleanly to bumps and cornering loads, reducing what engineers call Johansprung mass and sharpening the feedback loop between tire and rider. These subtle changes in geometry and linkage did not just show up on lap times. They changed how much trust a rider could place in the bike under pressure. When the shock was positioned vertically, forces traveled in a straight line from the axle up through the frame, letting the chassis and suspension work together rather than against each other. That meant more confidence, more precise inputs, and the ability to push the limits with less guesswork. The lessons learned from these experiments would soon influence every Yamaha sport bike that reached the showroom floor, as designers weighed the benefits of pure race feel against the realities of everyday riding. In 1985, Yamaha released the YZR500, the first production motorcycle to feature a true twin-spar aluminum frame. For riders used to traditional steel, the difference was immediate. The spars ran directly from the steering head to the swing arm pivot, echoing the triangle concept proven in Grand Prix racing. This layout delivered a level of torsional stiffness and steering precision that had only been available to factory racers a few years earlier. 2 years later, the YZR500 Genesis brought the same engineering to the leaderbike class. Its cast and machined aluminum frame, inspired by the YZR500's Delta box, was engineered for mass production, but retained the core geometry and load paths of the race bikes. The Genesis also introduced adjustable suspension and a more relaxed rake, balancing razor-sharp handling with the stability and comfort needed for road use. These two models mark the moment when Yamaha's radical racing ideas became everyday reality, providing concrete proof that lessons from the track could thrive on the street. Every engineering breakthrough comes with its own set of trade-offs. Yamaha's decision to bring the twin-spar aluminum frame from the YZR500 to production bikes forced designers to balance the raw stiffness of a race chassis against the comfort and cost demands of the street. Early Delta box frames delivered unmatched torsional rigidity, but this came with higher manufacturing expenses and a ride that could feel unyielding on rough pavement. To make these innovations work for everyday riders, Yamaha engineers softened the geometry, introducing a gentler rake and a longer wheelbase in models like the YZR500 Genesis. This subtle relaxation of angles traded some razor-edge responsiveness for greater stability and comfort, a compromise that still preserved much of the race-bred precision. One senior Yamaha engineer reflected that connecting the head pipe and pivot assembly in a triangular shape gave us quick handling, but we had to tune it carefully for real-world roads. The core idea behind the twin spar, directing forces along straight rigid beams, remains at the heart of Yamaha's modern R-Series, proof that the lessons learned on the track continue to shape the ride experience for every street rider today. Every modern sport bike traces its handling DNA to these chassis breakthroughs. As manufacturers chase lighter, sharper machines, the YZR500's legacy shapes every corner you carve today. Innovation on the track still echoes on the street, reminding us that tomorrow's ride is always forged in today's risk. What is your take?